Flipping the Table.
I wanted to take a second to thank our sponsors, Whole Foods Market, the Public Health Institute, and Roots of Change. Without their help, we couldn't present this podcast. Hello, this is Michael Reed Dimmock, and you're listening to Flipping the Table, a podcast featuring honest conversations and brief commentaries about the future of food and farming. I'm inspired by the thousands of farmers, ranchers, entrepreneurs, activists, and policymakers across this nation who are meeting the many challenges related to nutrition, poverty, pollution, and climate. This podcast highlights the people and actions making our planet and communities healthier and more resilient. I hope to inspire listeners to use their food purchases and their votes, our democracy, to flip the table in support of a new and better food system for us all, to be part of the delicious revolution now underway. The young people of Sweden seem to be teaching us some important lessons lately. I loved Greta Thunberg's recent UN speech in which she said, and I paraphrase, that she is horrified that the world's most powerful adults are essentially arguing about money in the face of the existential threat that is global warming. That was so true and so needed to be said. I recently had the pleasure of having the table flipped on me by another young, inspiring, motivated, and activist Swede, Elise Johanson of Stockholm. She emailed me last spring sharing that she and a colleague had launched a project called Regeneration, aimed at stimulating changes that would make the Swedish food system healthier and more resilient. She said she was coming to California over the summer to study the food movement and to meet with many leaders. Her hope was that her findings in California would inspire her fellow Swedes to adopt and adapt some of our approaches. She asked to interview me for a podcast about the work of Roots of Change. Of course, I agreed to meet. The following is that interview. Our producer, Patrick Sexton, felt that it would be a good way to offer our listeners more context that clarifies where I, as the host of Flipping the Table, come from. Before we begin, I wanted to thank Elise Johanson for her commitment to making changes in her nation, for her interest in Roots of Change, and for traveling thousands of miles to record this interview that was first distributed in Sweden last month. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Regeneration podcast. My name is Elise, and in this podcast we're exploring the food scene, meeting with changemakers and entrepreneurs in the food industry who are all working towards a more sustainable and just food system for everyone. In this episode, I'm meeting with Michael Dimmock, who's the president for Roots of Change. It's a think and do tank that advocates for a healthy, equitable, and sustainable food system for the people, businesses, and the planet. We're talking about how every one of us can contribute to a better food system, the Healthy Soil program and sweet and beverage tax that they're working on, what it's like to work with food policy, how to incentivize farmers to use more sustainable practices, and a lot more. So let's dive in. Hi Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Elise. Nice to be with you.
So where are we right now?
We are in Oakland, California, in the headquarters of the Public Health Institute. Roots of Change, the organization I run, is a project within the Public Health Institute. And the reason that we are part of Public Health Institute is because the food system is one of the two primary drivers of public health challenges in this century. The other, obviously, is climate change. And they are linked, actually, the food system and climate. So we came here in 2013. We existed separately from Public Health Institute until 2013, but we came here because we wanted to align ourselves and bring in as allies in food work the public health community, and this is one of the largest public health nonprofits in the world. And there's 200 projects, over $100 million a year budget, and in many different areas of public health, and we're a very small project within that larger community.
What are some of the most important links between public health, food, and environment?
Well, there are a lot. I'll start with this, that the human search for food is the primary disruptor of natural systems on the earth, right? Our need to grow food or harvest or grow animals has basically changed the landscape of the planet and disrupted nutrient cycles having to do with soil, the climate, obviously, agriculture, particularly the clearing of land, is one of the primary causes of emissions. Plowing the ground has been a huge source of the excess carbon in the atmosphere. Is plowing of the ground and releasing carbon, allowing carbon to oxidize and enter the atmosphere. So, and then obviously diet. I know that you are familiar with Eat Lancet report, which recently described the impacts and said that the food system is a primary driver of human health challenges. And we're not eating the way we evolved to eat now. We're eating way too much sugar, way too much fat, way too much salt. Things that were hard to find in nature are now completely ubiquitous, and that causes huge health challenges, particularly for indigenous populations, people that are closer to their original diets and have been extremely harmed. So the public health world, if it's going to take on the big challenges of the century, it has to deal with the food system. Because it's tied to everything, water. Obviously, the way we describe it is that the food system is the base system of civilization. Civilization occurred when agriculture was developed. That's when towns began. Before that, we were moving, searching for food, following food. Now, then, when agriculture was created, civilization was created. So if we don't create a sustainable food system, we cannot have a sustainable civilization. That's the bottom line. So that's why many years ago I got involved, because I had worked more in development issues in Nepal and environmental issues. But then I realized, wow, if I really want to get at the root causes of the challenges of our time, we got to get to the food system, because that's the base system, and if we set a good pattern there, it'll affect everything.
What are some major challenges that you see now that maybe have come up over the last couple of years?
Challenges for the planet, or challenges in the world that I work in?
The world that you work in.
Okay. So running a nonprofit that works in policy, because that's really what we do now, is we try. So maybe I should back up a little bit to get to the answer to your question. So when we started, this was back in 2006. Actually, my work started earlier than that. I started in the early 2000s, going into communities to help the community members who were members of different organizations come together to figure out how to ensure the survivability, the viability, the sustainability of agriculture in their communities. These were communities in California that were rapidly urbanizing. And so my first years of work were trying to help communities organize to develop marketing systems or policies that would allow the rural food producers to survive in a rapidly urbanizing area. And with urbanization came environmentalists, people that had political concerns about the food system. How were workers being treated? What was happening with the environment? And so those groups that were advocating for agriculture to change were creating lots of problems for agriculture because they were having to deal with it. So we tried to spend a lot of time working with all those groups to come to consensus, a place where they could agree about how they were going to keep agriculture alive, because the environmentalists and the labor folks wanted agriculture to survive, but they wanted it to change. So that caught the attention of a group of foundations in 2004 back, so that's 15 years ago now, that we're starting a project which was called Roots of Change. It was almost 10 foundations who had for years been investing in trying to create more sustainable agriculture, and they were failing. And they realized that they had been approaching it in a not an effective way, so they wanted to change it. So they wanted to build more of a larger base of people a group of leaders with a vision for the future. What could agriculture look like? And then a strategy for getting there by using philanthropic money to get there. So Roots of Change, actually the organization that I ran at that time was called, or is still called, Innovations Network, Agricultural Innovations Network. Okay. And we were the strategic planning organization I was describing, and we became a grantee of this fund. And because of what we were doing in Ventura County, which is a county in Southern California, right in the north end of LA, that was much like where I live now, Sonoma County, a lot of pressure to urbanize. And we'd had real success there in getting the farmers and the activists to work together for the future. So this foundation group hired my organization, gave us a grant to take that idea and spread it up and down the state. And after a couple of years, I got hired to run the Roots of Change Fund and to develop the strategy that was needed to implement the strategy that was needed to change the food system in California by the year 2030. So what we did is we went all around the state and created these little groups like we had done in Ventura. And that did is create a base of people that had a focus on the future of agriculture and food systems, which was really important. Over time, we realized, okay, we can't just work on a vision and an understanding the food system, because a lot of people didn't really understand how the food system worked. So we spent a lot of time just describing its complexity, from farm to table. What does it take to get food out, and what does it take to do it in a socially just and environmentally friendly and a profitable way for the farmers? Because if there's no profit, they're going to go out of business. It's going to be over. They can't do it, and that was happening a lot. So once we had created many groups around the state, maybe 10, 12 groups, we started talking about what we could do to engage the urban regions. So I was also involved with something called slow food back then. The slow food movement in the United States was getting bigger, and we went to the mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, who is now the governor of California. He was elected last year. So we went to him and said, would you be willing to host an event in 2008 in San Francisco? It was called Slow Food Nation. It was the largest event dedicated to the future of the food system and the need to change it that's ever been held in the United States. Lasted 3 days. There were about 80,000 people that came.
Oh, wow.
It made the front page of the New York Times and many other publications, and it was a collaboration between many different organizations and people, and Roots of Change was a participant in that. But that developed the relationship with the mayor. And then after that was over, we went to him and said, would you develop the state's, maybe the nation's, first food policy for a city? And he said, yes, he would. So he came with us and met with farmers in the Central Valley and met with all kinds of groups, the Secretary of Agriculture for the state, and we worked with his staff to develop a policy, which he passed. And we had a summit meeting here in California in 2009 where we invited groups from all over, in Oakland actually, where we are now. And he came and he gave a speech about it, and there was someone in the audience who worked for the mayor of Los Angeles. So she said, will you work with us in Los Angeles? So then we work with the city of Los Angeles to create a food policy council and a policy that became their food policy for LA under the mayor Villaraigosa. And then because of that, San Diego wanted to do the same thing. So that's how we started getting more policy oriented. We worked with all the people we'd create around the state and got them to work with these cities to develop these policies. And then it became a natural for us to begin to work at the state level. And that's what we do now. We really focus, 90% of our work is getting the state of California to develop policies which will create the incentives for sustainable and a just food system to emerge. The right kinds of incentives, because right now all the incentives go to industrial food systems. I'm talking about the subsidies and policies really don't focus on sustainability as much as they do, not nearly as much. The preponderance is about helping the big farms economically survive and not thinking about labor or the ecology. And the reason we got into policy is because the marketplace, the organic marketplace, the market for organic food, healthy food, socially just food, there's a lot of marketing message about that now. So it's going very well. And also the media was covering in 2008 when we did Slow Food Nation. After that, the media started covering food systems in around the United States all the time. There were stories almost every day in the major newspapers and the radio and television. So the country woke up to the need to change the food system, not just for farm labor, but for a lot of different things. We realized, wow, it's working in the media, it's working in private businesses, in the retail stores telling the story, but policy is not changing. So we're not going to make that much progress until the policy changes, because most of the taxpayer dollars are going to the wrong thing.
Could you describe a little bit more in detail how working with policy actually is, and what do you actually do?
Mm-hmm. It's actually pretty simple now. What we do is, I'll tell a story. So at the time that we were developing all these groups around the state, back in between 2007 and 2010, we were also developing a pilot program that had started in San Diego with a group down there, a nonprofit down there, that was giving low-income people that were refugees, mostly from Africa, but also Latin America, who were down in San Diego. They had developed a program, this nonprofit, which gave low-income families who bought fresh fruits and vegetables matching dollars. So if they had, in the United States, we have something called food stamps. It's called SNAPs, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's money from the federal government that comes on like a credit card almost, or a debit card. Every month, the government puts money on that debit card so that low-income people can buy food. Well, this pilot program down in San Diego said, okay, if you bring your SNAP card and you buy fresh fruits and vegetables, we'll double your purchase of fresh fruits and vegetables. So you'll be able to eat more healthfully, because fresh fruits and vegetables at farmers markets are more expensive than grocery stores, and fresh fruits and vegetables are more important than processed foods. So are more expensive than processed foods. So by giving this what we call incentive dollars, it made it more affordable for people to eat healthfully. The other thing it did, the farmers market was made up of farmers who were refugees, so it increased the income of the farmers. So it was a win-win situation. At the same time as we were building these groups around the state to talk about the food systems in their communities, we developed a pilot program where we took that one project in San Diego and we spread it all up and down the state. We applied for grants from the government, and we used philanthropic money that Roots of Change had, and we actually spread it to, I think, 17 regions in the state. And we had lots of money to increase the program, and then we started collecting data. Was it changing the way families were eating? Were they eating more fruits and vegetables? Was it good for the farmers? And we worked with a group in the Midwest and on the East Coast to gather the data to show that it was having a positive impact. Then we took that data and wrote a report, and we went to the federal government. And we said to the Congress of the USA, back in 2012, we said to them, why don't you create a federal grant program to give farmers markets money to do these matches for people on SNAP? And they said yes, and in 2014, in the Farm Bill, they put $100 million in the bill to provide matches.
Oh, wow.
So we changed the federal law.
That's great.
It was a great experience because we did it with, again, lots of people working together, all the data from the farmers markets and from the families that were receiving the nutrition. And then, so once we had experienced that and we had all these groups around the state, we said, and the federal law required there be a match from the community that was applying for the money. So you could get $100,000 or more. Some people were getting millions of dollars, some organizations, but they had to match it with millions of dollars. So we went to the state of California, actually a legislator, local legislator, a state legislator from San Francisco, Philip Ting, his name's Phil Ting, and we asked him to write a bill for us that would create a program like the federal program in California so that organizations in California could get match money from the state. And after 2 years, I think in 2015, we passed that law. So that was the first time we passed a law, and then we worked with the labor industry to help people that work in retail stores, because what was happening at that time, I think in 2016, retail stores were being bought by investment groups, and overnight, without telling the employees, they would just fire everybody. They'd come in on Monday, and they'd all get fired because some new investment group had bought the grocery store. So we joined forces with the labor industry to say that's not fair. You need, if you're going to fire someone, you need to give them many weeks, you need to give them health care, and you need to do it humanely. So that was the second law we changed. So once we started doing that, we realized there's a way to get law change in California or in the United States. What you do is you write an idea on a piece of in a what we call a white paper, a short little document that describes what you want to do, and then you go and you talk to a legislator and you get them to write the actual law. And then you have to rally all of your network, which we had a big one in California, to go and talk to the legislators in Sacramento, write letters, make calls, use their Twitter accounts, whatever, to inform the legislators that they support that idea. And that's how we've done it. So we've changed 3 laws now, and we've funded almost $20 million worth of money for the matching here through that matching program, the California Nutrition Incentive Program, which matches the federal program. And so the federal program just got reallocated this year. It was $100 million in 2014. Now it's $250 million. So more than doubled. So we have one big thing we're working on now. We're trying to tax sugary beverages.
Yeah, I read that on your website.
Yeah. We're trying to get a 2 cent per ounce tax on sugary beverages. Why are we doing that? Well, it'll make them more expensive and it'll lower the consumption because they're hurting people. Yeah. Lots of people are getting diabetes. But even more importantly, I think, because in the long run, the biggest problem in the food system, as I mentioned earlier, is we don't make the right investments. We give the money from the government, from taxpayers, to the wrong things. We subsidize farmers. We subsidize their insurance, so they have insurance so they can farm badly, and then they get paid for insurance even though they're farming badly. So that's where most of the money goes, right? So what we said is we need a revenue stream in California through a sweetened beverage tax that will create money to make the right kinds of investments in California, food justice investments, nutrition incentive program, so that we don't have to go back every year and ask for more money. We'll have a permanent funding stream for nutrition incentives. And we could go from $5 million a year to $30 or $40 or $50 million a year. At the same time, we can improve school food. We can give the schools enough money to buy organic food or buy local food, connecting local farms to the school districts so they can purchase from the local farms, which it builds the base of local food systems. And then also we want to do a program that used to exist at the federal level called the Community Food Projects grants, where communities that are trying to come up with either small business enterprises or urban agriculture like that, things like that are locally based, that are meant to help low-income families access better food through activities in their town, in their community, a grant program that would fund that work. So we have lots of ideas. It's hard to pass a sweetened beverage tax because
what is the reaction from like the soda industry?
They don't like it because they fear it. Makes them look bad. They spend a lot of money lobbying, and they give lots of money to the campaign accounts. The campaigns. They contribute money to the legislators to run their campaigns. So they basically have huge influence in California on the legislature, and we're trying to break that influence. We're trying to show the people of California that the legislators are not serving them well by allowing the sweetened beverage industry to charge less for soda than it does for water. It's cheaper to buy soda in places in California than it is to get water. That's insane. So we're trying to change that. So that's what we do. And so what we do is we communicate with our communities. We create materials for people to educate others about these important issues. We write the white papers that become legislation, do a lot of research, and we now have this podcast called Flipping the Table, which is like you're doing now, trying to create conversations that educate people about the importance of changing the food system.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. Truly inspiring.
Great. Thank you.
So we already talked a little bit about the major challenges in our food system. And what are some things that people can do on an individual level to contribute to a healthier, better, more social just food system?
That's a really important question. What can each of us do to make the food system healthier? We can all become smart shoppers. So are we looking to see if the food that we're buying is grown using an ecologically responsible method? Is it biodynamic? Is it organic? Is it in some form sustainable? That's really important. Are we buying from our local producers? Do we have a relationship with our farmers or our food producers? Do we know them? Do we know the truth behind their products? Are we voting for the politicians that are aware of the challenges in the food system? One of the things that we've done in California is we realize that a lot of legislators are not that intelligent about what's going on with agriculture and food. It's low on their priority list. It's not something they think about a lot. It's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth thing on their list of what they care about. So we've been trying to increase their focus on food systems, and we did that by creating an annual report that talks about all the bills that the food movement in California wants to see passed, and then we record all the votes of all the legislators in the state legislature, which is like our federal government has two sides. It has the Senate and the Assembly, like the House and the Senate at the federal level. So what we do is we track all the votes on the issues we care about, on the bills we care about. We track the votes and we make them public. And then we give an award every year to the legislators that are good legislators, that are doing the right thing. So we've been doing that now 6 years, and that has created more focus and more awareness on the part of legislators. And so that's helpful. And that's something, so citizens can get involved in that by supporting organizations that create a report like that. Are they making donations to the nonprofits that are working to advocate for change? But really the most important thing a consumer can do is, or a person, a eater, a person that has to eat every day, is to make the right purchasing choices and the right votes. Are they voting for the legislators who are responsible, care about, and realize the connection between climate change, diabetes, obesity, all the things that are affecting the public health? Do they understand the link to the food system around those issues? That's really critical. If we're going to make it through this century, we have to do this. So we need good leaders.
And if I'm someone who is interested in like changing the food system, but maybe it feels too complex to understand, like how can I start to educate myself? Are there any resources out there?
Well, listen to your podcast, right?
Yeah.
That's important. I mean, well, the good news is it's about paying attention, right? Because like I think when I said this earlier about what's happening in the U.S. with all the news about the food system, I assume it's the same in Sweden. There's more and more news about the food system.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so opening our ears and paying attention to those, because the information is out there. Ask your retailer. Like when I buy meat, I always ask the retailer, where's that meat from? Or if it's not clear, because the stores I go to now, they make it clear. It says the farm. It says what kind of meat. Is it organic? Is it grass-fed? So buying grass-finished is really important, grass-finished meats, rather than meats that are produced in factory farms. And so I think there's a lot of ways to get information. The web, there's so much on the web now about food systems. One of the most exciting things, and I see it in you, I mean, you seem like a millennial, someone who's younger, certainly than me. I'm in my 60s. So you're in school, you're getting educated, you're still in that period of your life. So that's fantastic that your generation is more focused on the food system than my generation was at your age. Like, you probably know way more about food than I did. And I do believe that is a very good sign that there is this increasing. The fact that you're even doing a podcast and that you focus on this project says to me, wow, that's a sign of change. The next generation gets it. The next generations, they're going to make the changes that are needed, because you guys are going to come. It's like what's going on with climate change, right? Northern Europe is kind of leading the way on climate change, it seems to me, in my mind. I mean, people are talking about it there. They're helping push. The French are doing a pretty good job on soil. The United States, with our current administration, is dragging its feet and causing all kinds of problems. It's very disappointing for a person like me to see what's going on in our government at the federal level. But then California is a leader. We have the strongest law in the state, one of the strongest in the nation, around taxing carbon. We charge companies that are emitting carbon in the environment. That creates a fund of money, and we use that money to pay farmers to build soil. We use some of that money. So they get paid for building up carbon in their soil. And that's really important, because carbon farming, as they call it here in the United States, is one of the things that needs to happen. So as a citizen, a resident, an eater in the world, person that cares about food, ask your legislator, what kind of laws can you pass to promote capturing of carbon in soil, making people healthier? I mean, yeah.
I read on your website that you work with something called the Healthy Soil Program.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, we support it. So that's a bill, like I was talking about the sweetened beverage tax or the California Nutrition Incentive Program. An allied organization of ours, I encourage all your folks to look it up. It's called the California Climate and Agriculture Network, or CalCAN, C-A-L as in California, and CAN, C, capital A, capital N, is like Roots of Change, an organization that comes up with ideas to create bills. And so they worked to create a bill called the Healthy Soils Program, which now the state passed. And so Roots of Change and many other organizations work with them to pass the bill at the legislature. We rally people to vote, to get the legislators to vote. And so what that did is it took some of that, what we call the law that created the fund of money that charges people for their emissions. AB 32 was the law. So the AB 32 money is a huge amount of money, $2 billion a year. So a certain amount of that money is carved out to provide incentives for farmers to capture soil. It's early, it's in a pilot phase, so what they're doing now is they're paying researchers to work with farmers to do demonstrations of how you capture carbon, and they're measuring the results. So it's a fairly new program, and it's not a ton of money. Maybe $20 million so far has been allocated. But the goal is to get that up to $100 million a year. That's the goal that we have, and our allies probably have slightly different numbers, but everybody wants to get a lot more money into that program.
And why is soil so important right now?
Yeah, because I actually, the way I think about soil is, it is where it all begins. People don't realize how important soil is. We're actually just beginning to understand the biology within the soil and how micronutrients are tied to different biological species, bacteria, other things that are going on in the soil to create nutrition. So there's so much more research that needs to be done, but the really big and easy thing for us to do is to capture, as we said earlier, they say up to 45% of the excess carbon in the environment and the atmosphere came from plowing since the 1400s. So we have to get that carbon back in the soil. And so that's why these kinds of projects, the French have committed to increase by 1/10% the soil carbon in France every year, and they're challenging other countries to do the same. Because a 2% increase in soil carbon would have a huge impact if it was planet-wide. It doesn't take that much to change because the land is so vast, and just a 2% change in carbon, actually 1% would have a huge impact, but 2% might even solve the problem.
How can we incentivize farmers to shift to more sustainable and regenerative practices?
Well, I can't speak exactly how you do it in the EU or in Sweden, but I can tell you this. Here in the United States, I was explaining earlier, I think, about insurance. We give the American public, the taxpayer, subsidizes the cost of insurance. Up to 35% of an annual insurance bill of a farmer is paid for by me and the other taxpayers in the United States. We don't require them to do anything to get that subsidy. So there are some small experiments in different parts of the country where we say, in order to get that subsidy, you have to do conservation practices to protect soil, clean the water. So I think all subsidies should be tied. That would change the system. If we said to farmers, we're not going to subsidize your insurance anymore, we're not going to give you price supports anymore, we're not going to give you the support you want as a farmer anymore, unless you do these things, it would happen because farmers need to make money, and farmers will do what the market tells them. They have to respond to the marketplace. So the government is a market as well as a grocer is a market. So let's change the system. That's very hard to do because the insurance companies don't want to do that. They make tons of money the way it is now. They don't want to change their systems. Corporations have a hard time changing. And so our job as advocates is to force those changes by creating the political environment. I'm very interested in the idea of the New Green Deal. Maybe you've heard about that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, so the New Green Deal is some of the young and progressive and some of the more progressive older legislators at the federal level are talking about this idea of the New Green Deal, where we invest in renewable energy and sustainable agriculture as engines for future economic development in the country, but also to repair the damage from climate change. So I love the idea because in the 1930s in the United States, when we had the Great Depression, the New Deal by the President Franklin Roosevelt transformed our economy, created jobs, and we were the healthiest economically in the 50s and 60s because of the New Green Deal, because of the New Deal back in the 30s and 40s. So we need to do something like that again because our country's really in a difficult place right now. Not only the reason that we have Donald Trump as the president is because there are a lot of scared people in our country, economically frightened. And that's impacting how people react and who they vote for. By creating a new Green Deal, I think we'll tackle this problem of the wealth gap, because this huge division of those who have lots of money and those who don't is causing all kinds of problems.
When I talk to people about some challenges and some solutions for our food system, something that often comes up is the cost of food. The food is too cheap. How do you think we will work with that in the future when we maybe start to compensate for the climate impact it has? Have you seen any changes in that area, just when it comes to the cost of food?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of two views of this. A lot of people will say food is too cheap. The reason that we have all these negative impacts is because we don't pay for the true cost of food. And then we have another group of people that say the food's too expensive for low-income people. And so that's a dichotomy. It's a contradiction in the food movement. In fact, on the way here, I was on a phone call talking with people about that exact problem. There's a meeting next week.
Okay.
And it's one of the issues we'll be talking about is so the problem is the wealth gap. I just mentioned it. The fact that people can't afford food is because they aren't getting paid well. They don't have jobs that pay them enough to live well. So in order to tackle that problem, right now we give food stamps, as I was saying, SNAPs, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's a Band-Aid. It's not fixing the problem. What we need are livable wages for people to get paid paid more so that they can afford the best food. Ironically, the people that work in the food sector are the lowest paid employees in the United States. So we have this huge weird dichotomy where those people who feed us get paid the least, and they can't even buy the good food, so they're buying bad food and they're unhealthy. So we need to figure out a way to pay people more, so that means fixing the economy. That's what I was saying earlier. We got to fix the economy. Then the price of food could go up so people could afford it. The other way to do it is you subsidize the farmers. The food could stay the same price as it is today, but we would only subsidize farmers to do the right thing. So there are two ways to do it. You can raise the price of food, but you can only raise the price of food if people can afford it. That means we need to have a better economy that pays them. If we can't do that, then we need to subsidize the farmers to do the right things to produce that food that's healthy. And not just the farmers, it's food companies. So taxing sugary beverages is a great way to do it. We take that tax money, $2 billion a year in California was what it would create. $1 billion would go to the school system to improve the schools, and $1 billion would be divided between different ways to improve public health. We're hoping a third of that billion, so $330 billion a year, would be invested in the food system projects I described. Nutrition incentives, community food projects, and school food. So that's another way to do it. You low-income families, their kids get to eat well when they're at school, or their parents get nutrition incentives so they can buy vegetables at the grocery store. There's ways to do it. My preferred way would be make the economy better. It's more just to give people livable wages. That's where we ultimately have to go. But until we get there, we have to use these other systems, subsidies.
What inspires you in your work?
Well, the beauty of sustainable agriculture, I've been on many farms. I used to farm. So seeing the difference between a really healthy farm and a sustainable farm, an organic farm, and let's say industrial agriculture, I'm inspired by the beauty that healthy agriculture creates. I'm inspired by the desire and the willingness of people to get up and say to their legislators, let's make change, and do it when we pass a law. I'm extremely inspired by that, motivated. I'm inspired by the next generation, like I was saying earlier. I am so inspired. So when I got into food system work 25 years ago or more now, there wasn't very many of us, and it was very hard but there's so many more people now, and that's very inspiring for me. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast that we do is because through the years I have gotten to know so many good people who are doing good work, and I wanted to have other people hear that because I've been inspired by their stories. That's what keeps me motivated, and I'm just one of those people who likes to be involved in making change. You know, when I was younger, when I first was in college, I thought, I'm going to go try and make a lot of money, and quickly realized that that was not what made me happy. So I decided to do other things, and I'm glad I did it. So I like working with people who are thinking deeply about what the world needs and trying to make that happen. That's inspiring for me.
And what is up next for Roots of Change? What are some things that you have going on?
Well, we're going to continue to work on the sweetened beverage tax. About 2 weeks ago, for the first time, we got it through the first committee in the legislature of California. That's hard to do. We got it through the first committee. We got a yes vote. And yesterday, we got killed in the second committee. So the bill was stopped, but it wasn't actually totally killed. The chairman of that committee said to us, I'll work with you over the next 6 months to bring it back in January of 2020. So we're going to work with that legislator and others to reshape the bill to get it into the legislature. If that doesn't work in 2020, we're going to put it on the statewide ballot. So that won't be the legislature's decision. It'll be the people of California during the next big election, 2020, when we vote for president. So we might do a statewide ballot initiative at that time. So that's just one issue, continuing to fight for money for the Healthy Soils program. There's other programs on water efficiency use, so farmers become really good with water. There's another program, another bill we're backing that gives farmers planning tools so that they can make their farms more resilient in the face of climate change. We're working to support that. And then there's a bill to make more money available to buy organic food for school meals. We're working on that. So, and there's a ton of other things we could do, generate ideas to make the right investments. And another exciting thing is we're working with the University of California at Davis, which is the big agricultural university in the United States, University of California at Davis, UC Davis. And there's an institute within the campus called the Agricultural Sustainability Institute. And we're working with them over the next year to do a series of conversations with farmers and scientists, with environmental justice advocates and scientists, talking about how to make California resilient in the face of climate change. So that'll be, and we're going to turn those into podcasts. So we're going to do a series of conversations because the farmers don't like to talk about climate change because it's a political thing. But they do want to talk about the health and the economic viability of their farms. So we're trying to use that lens, that frame of economic viability and the resilience of their farms and their ability to continue to profit in the future. And by putting scientists, they trust the scientists, they'll talk to the scientists. So we're thinking it'll be some interesting conversations. So I'll be working on that for the next year or two.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. You have been listening to Flipping the Table, a podcast about food, farming, and the future. Flipping the Table is hosted by me, Michael Reed Dimmock, and produced by Patrick Sexton. Our production colleague is Doris Meyer. Our sponsors include Roots of Change and the Public Health Institute. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, or would like to sponsor Flipping the Table, please email us at comments@fthetable.com. That's comments@fthetable.com. Thank you for listening.